Welcome back to our journey into the world of tarot. The teachings of Gemistus Plethon weren't just philosophical musings. They aimed to free humanity from the chains of religious dogma, opening our eyes to a new form of sacredness, one nourished by ancient rites and original truth. 50 years before the invention of printing, in a mostly illiterate world, what tool could be more effective than a deck of symbolic images to transmit a new way of life? In an era where the written word was a privilege for the few and oral tradition risked censorship, images became the perfect vehicle for initiatory knowledge. This is why I insist on considering the tarot the true secret book of the Renaissance. Their splendor fully reflects the profound mission of that era, to reawaken human beings to the beauty of the world. The Renaissance is exactly this, a rebirth of vision, a re-evaluation of man as the measure of all things, a return to the ancient wisdom that preceded medieval dogmatic rigidity. In the tarot, I see the reflection of this very intent. They don't just represent a path of self-knowledge, they embody the vision of an ideal world founded on truth, rather than on blind adherence to a creed imposed from above. As I mentioned in a previous video, the tarot must be read following a precise pattern. Even in its first part, it anticipates ideas and concepts that today, more than half a millennium later, seem almost obvious. This was also made possible by the contributions of great modern thinkers like Carl Gustav Jung, who taught us to distinguish between the conscious and unconscious, rational and irrational areas of the psyche. In the tarot, for example, we recognize in the Fool and the Magician the contrast between unconsciousness and awareness. In the High Priestess and the Empress, the two polarities of the feminine, introverted and extroverted, and in the Emperor and the Hierophant, the corresponding qualities of the masculine. This mapping of the human psyche, codified in symbolic images, anticipates depth psychology by centuries. Today, we can proudly say that character is what distinguishes us, that we are unique individuals with the freedom to develop our potential. Yet, in the Middle Ages, reality was very different. Natural instincts and aspirations were systematically repressed through prayer, penance, and rigid adherence to one's social class. A peasant could never aspire to become a knight, let alone a king. Society was conceived as an unchangeable order established by God Himself, in which everyone had to accept their place without any ambition for change. The information contained in the tarot structure would have shocked a mentality trained from childhood to recognize only one reality, that of religious dogma. To think freely, as we can today by following the sequence of the major arcana, would have been not only inconceivable, but dangerous. The very idea of an individual path of inner growth, guided by personal searching rather than ecclesiastical authority, constituted a potentially deadly heresy. For the beliefs of the time, the interpretation of the tarot we propose today would have been revolutionary and subversive. Everyone's lives revolved around devotion to a single God. Just think of St. Augustine's Confessions, an unconditional obedience to sovereigns, considered holders of power granted directly by the divine. The idea of a free self, capable of seeking truth outside the laws established by the clergy, was not only unthinkable, but punishable by atrocious tortures and death at the stake. The inquisitorial trials of the era testify to how dangerous it was to even doubt the truths imposed by the Church. This is why I call the tarot the secret book of the Renaissance. They hold a teaching that was extraordinarily enlightening for that time and fully reflect the splendor of Renaissance thought, that underground current of Neoplatonic wisdom that flowed parallel to the official culture. It was only with Jung, about 4 centuries later, that similar insights into the workings of the human psyche were rediscovered. The overall meaning of the sequence isn't limited to analyzing the individual's growth path. It also shows the traps and obstacles one might encounter along the way. The fool and the magician, so complementary, immediately represent the fundamental dialectic between conscious and unconscious. On one hand, conscious self-awareness, and on the other, the light-hearted unconsciousness of someone who has not yet begun the journey of knowledge. They are the beginning of the development of individual thought and consciousness. When a human being opens up to others and begins to relate to the world, what primarily determines their behavior is their temperament, what we now call character, represented by the four ruling figures of the tarot: the high priestess, introverted feminine; the empress, extroverted feminine; the emperor, extroverted masculine; and the hierophant, introverted masculine. Character is the first influence that governs our being, the lens through which we perceive and interpret reality. This leads to the fundamental question: what drives a person towards others? What forces move their actions? The next set of 4 cards answers: drives and aspirations. Love and falling in love, the lovers; the will to conquer and assert oneself, the chariot; the sense of justice and balance, justice; and the prudent, solitary search for knowledge, the hermit. These 4 cards represent the deep motivations that push us to act, the desires that animate us, and the aspirations that give meaning to our existence. But even the wisest and most prudent person, whether a fool or an emperor, remains subject to the fatalities of life, symbolized by the wheel of fortune. The wheel, rooted in ancient mythologies and the cult of the goddess Fortuna, represents the unpredictability of destiny. People, like leaves in the wind, are now lifted up, now cast down, with no apparent logic or merit. It's the universal human experience in the face of the imponderable, of chance, of events that escape our control. From here, a deeper reflection begins. How do we interpret life's events, what the ancients called fate? How do we make sense of suffering, loss, and the apparent injustice of destiny? An atheist or a materialist would answer that you need strength to resist, patient waiting, the hanged man, or, ultimately, resignation to death as the natural end of all things. But this view reduces life to a simple clash with nature, a Darwinian struggle for survival devoid of higher meaning. Those who feel the need for a higher meaning, however, imagine a superior being who governs destiny with infinite wisdom. From this arise the categories of good and evil, moral norms, commandments, and faith as a consolation and a guide. This is the perspective of temperance, an angel holding 2 pitchers, pouring water from one to the other, symbolizing the life of the faithful flowing by divine will. The water, passing from one pitcher to the other, represents the believer's existence, harmonized and guided by a benevolent superior force that arranges everything according to an inscrutable but just plan. Yet, in the face of inexplicable pain, like the death of an innocent person, the suffering of a child, the destruction of a virtuous life, this vision falters and shows its cracks. Why do pure souls die for no apparent reason? Why does the righteous suffer while the wicked prosper? Here, the tower intervenes, struck by divine lightning, a powerful image of God's omnipotence and inscrutable will. It's the crisis of faith in the face of the absurd, the collapse of certainties when reality contradicts religious promises. The tower represents the moment when the faithful confronts the apparent arbitrariness of the divine, the impossibility of rationally understanding its decisions. An emperor, accustomed to earthly power and the ability to control events, cannot accept such helplessness before destiny. So, he summons the wise men, the astrologers, the natural philosophers, to scan the heavens in search of this supreme being and its mechanisms. But observing the sky, the wise men find no trace of a personal God who arbitrarily intervenes in human affairs. Instead, they discover the cyclical and orderly movement of the stars, the real and measurable influence of the moon on tides' life cycles, and animal behavior, and finally, they recognize in the sun the great regulator of the universe and of life on Earth. This discovery leads them to imagine the universe as a great, harmonious, and predictable machine. By knowing its mechanisms through study and observation, one might at least anticipate its moves. This is the origin of predictive astrology, no longer a capricious god, but intelligible and constant natural laws. But for Neoplatonists like Platon, there was another, more subtle and profound force that could only be perceived through an initiatory awakening, that of the anima mundi, the soul of the world. Therefore, Platon does not end the tarot with the sun card, which would represent a purely mechanistic view of the universe, but adds two final, fundamentally important cards. The awakening, or judgment, represents the initiate who awakens from the sleep of dogma, who overcomes both materialism and blind faith to access a direct, experiential knowledge of truth. It is the moment of inner transformation, of spiritual rebirth that grants access to a broader perception of reality. Finally, the world symbolizes the awakened person's conscious connection with the forces of nature unleashed by the anima mundi, that cosmic principle that pervades every creature and unifies the entire universe into a living organism. We are not separate from the cosmos, but participants in its life, conscious fragments of an intelligent and animated whole. So, the tarot reveals to us that our planet is not an inert body to be exploited, nor a temporary stage for a drama to be resolved elsewhere, but a living being in continuous motion, worthy of respect and love. They hold the path of an authentic initiation, from limited individual consciousness to harmony with the cosmos and with the earth, our mother and common home. This symbolic journey condenses the secrets of the Renaissance, the return to ancient wisdom, the overcoming of dogma through direct knowledge, the reconciliation between humanity and nature, and the celebration of the world's beauty as a manifestation of the divine, a teaching that, hidden in seemingly harmless images, has been able to cross centuries, bringing the revolutionary message of the Neoplatonic masters to us today. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. If you found this journey as fascinating as I did, please give this video a like and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss our next exploration. See you in the next video.